Okay, so we're going to start with just a very basic how to graph a linear equation if you're given the y-intercept and the slope. And the reason we do this is it's a very common type of linear equation. In fact, you should have just completed the assignment of finding the slope and the y-intercept from an equation. So hopefully that part's review. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to use those two parts to actually go through and graph that information to make a straight line representing that equation. So y equals 2x plus 3, that's the slope intercept form. The 3 is your y-intercept, but make sure you steal that front sign. So if it's a plus sign, that's going to be a positive 3. If it was a minus sign in front of it, you would think of that as a negative 3. The slope, hey, I've already taught you, take a look at that number that's in front of the x right there. So that's a positive 2 for the slope. Using those two pieces of information, again, we need to graph it onto a coordinate plane, okay? You know, it's got the y-axis running up and down. You've got the x-axis running left and right. So the first thing is find the y-intercept number on the y-axis. Our y-intercept number was positive 3. So go right here on the y-axis, okay? Right here on the y-axis and find not just 3, but positive 3. So don't choose this negative 3, choose the positive 3 right there. Put a dot, and then we move on to the second part. Turn the slope into a fraction. If it's not a fraction, you know, like it's a 2 sitting there, just put a 1 under it, okay? And this is the last part. We're going to use that fraction to move from this first point that we put here at positive 3. And what happens is that top number is a positive 2, so that means that we would go up 2 spots. So you'd go up 1, 2, but you don't put a dot there. Then you look at the bottom number, and that's a 1. And so we would go over 1 spot. And I've got a typo right here I need to fix. There we go. So we went up 2 because that's what the top number told us to do, and over 1, and we put a dot right here. Connect the 2 points and you're done graphing it. So let's do a quick little recap before we try this again. The y-intercept is basically the starting point, and the slope is going to be your moving pattern, okay? So let's take a look at this one. Y equals 3x plus 1. Your y-intercept is going to be positive 1. So that means that we need to put a dot right at positive 1 on your y-axis. This is called a y-intercept. So on this y-axis is where we're trying to steal that point. So there's the dot right there. Plus 1, plus 1. Now, our slope is 3, and it's not a fraction, so we need to make it into a fraction. How do we make a whole number into a fraction? You just put a 1 under it. And then you're going to use that fraction, that slope fraction, you're going to use that as a moving pattern to move from this starting point. The top number is the 3. And so since it's positive, that means you're going to jump up 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3, but don't put a dot there yet. You got to look at the bottom number of that fraction. In this case, it's a 1, so we'd go over 1 to the right. And so now I can put a dot right there. Connect those 2 points, and you're done graphing the line. So how do you handle fractions and negative signs? That's usually what starts to cause some problems for people. So let's take a look at this real quick. It's the same thing though. What is your y-intercept? In this case, it is negative 2. You had to steal the sign in front of it. So where would you put a dot at? It's not at positive 2 on the y-axis. You'd have to come down and put a dot at negative 2 on the y-axis. The next thing that we do is, again, we go and we take a look at your slope number. Well, the slope number is also negative. You know, it was negative 3. So there's your slope, negative 3. How do you make a negative number into a fraction? Surprise, surprise, you just put a 1 under it, okay? And now you're going to use that fraction just like you always have, but this is what you do with a negative sign on the top. If it's a negative 3, you're just going to move down 3 spots. So from this negative 2, you're going to move down 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. Now, I've been interrupted, so let me see if I'm at the right spot. We're using the top part of the fraction to tell us whether we go up or down. If it's a negative number on the top part, we go down that many. If it was a positive 3 on top, then instead of going down 3, I would go up 3 spots, and I would land here at the positive 1. But because it had that negative sign, that means that we're going to go down 3. So from negative 2 to negative 3 is 1, negative 3 to negative 4 is 1, and negative 4 to negative 5 is 1. So that's 3 movements down. And then we have a positive 1 on the bottom, and so that means we'd go to the right. If it was a negative 1 on the bottom, we'd go to the opposite way, the left one. So we're going to move once to the right, and right here is where I'm going to put my second dot. and then I can connect those 2 points, and we're done. I'm not going to go through and do this whole equation this way, and I'd like you to see what it would look like without having these steps right here if we just did it. The first thing I would do is say, hey, here is my y-intercept at -5, so I'm going to put a dot right here at -5. This is my slope, 2/3. That means I'm going to go up 2 spots and to the right 3 spots. So watch my movements up here. Up 2, and then over 3 to the right. 1, 2, 3. So the key with using the slope is you don't put a dot as soon as you moved up or down. You've got to use both of these movements right here, the up and over or the down and over, to be able to do this, and then you just connect those 2 dots and you're finished. So if they're asking how to graph a linear equation, if you have a y-intercept and the slope, you're good to go. If you don't have the y-intercept and the slope, that is a totally different lesson, and we'll get to that later in the chapter.